A terrified black girl is running for her life down a lonely highway when she sees a biker roaring toward her. In one desperate moment, she flashes a hidden hand signal, one only meant for someone begging for help. The biker slams his brakes because he's seen that same signal before. And the last time he saw it, it came from someone he lost. What starts as a rescue turns into a high-speed chase as a dark truck begins hunting them across the back roads. But the biker is hiding a truth of his own. These men aren't just after the girl. They've been waiting for him. And the girl knows a secret that could shatter everything he thought he understood. 2 broken lives, 1 silent signal, and a past that refuses to stay buried. When danger closes in from every side, who will be saved? And who will be taken again? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late August heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Sweat trickled down Nia Washington's neck as she burst through the back door of the rundown safe house, her bare feet hitting the worn wooden steps with desperate thuds. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she plunged into the dense tree line behind the house, branches whipping against her arms and face. Don't look back. Just run! The woods were a blur of green and brown, twigs and pine needles stabbing into her tender feet. But the pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting away. The familiar terror clawed at her throat, the same fear she'd lived with for months now. But this time it pushed her forward instead of holding her frozen. Through gaps in the leaves, she caught glimpses of the highway beyond. Highway 17. She'd memorized the number from whispered conversations between the guards, storing it away like a precious secret. Just like the other secret she'd kept hidden, the pamphlet from that social worker, the one she'd carefully folded and tucked beneath her thin mattress, the one that showed her the signal. 3 simple gestures that could mean the difference between captivity and freedom. Branches scratched her arms as she pushed through the final stretch of undergrowth. The asphalt suddenly appeared before her, sun-baked and shimmering in the afternoon heat. Nia's legs trembled as she stumbled to a stop at the road's edge, her chest heaving with ragged breaths. That's when she heard it. The distinctive rumble of a motorcycle engine approaching from around the bend. Through the heat haze, she made out a single rider on a Harley-Davidson, the chrome catching the sunlight like signals of hope. This was her chance. Maybe her only chance. With shaking hands, Nia raised her arm. The movements felt clumsy, but she forced herself to remember the sequence she'd practiced in secret so many times. 1, 2, 3. The desperate gestures of someone asking for help, asking to be seen. The motorcycle's engine changed pitch as the rider slowed. Nia's heart leapt into her throat. He'd seen her. He was stopping. The Harley came to a halt several yards away, its engine rumbling like distant thunder. The rider was a big man, intimidating in worn leather despite the heat. His face was weathered, with several days' worth of stubble and eyes that had seen too much. A Hell's Angels vest covered in patches stretched across his broad shoulders. Stone Callahan felt his breath catch as he watched the girl's trembling hands complete the sequence. That signal. He hadn't seen it since that day, the day Mariah disappeared. His sister had flashed those same desperate gestures from a car window, but he'd been too far away, too late to reach her. He wasn't too late this time. Stone's eyes swept the road in both directions, years of survival instinct kicking in. The highway stretched empty in both directions, but something in his gut told him that wouldn't last long. The girl, she couldn't be more than 16 or 17, stood shaking at the road's edge, her bare feet dirty and scratched, wearing clothes that had seen better days. "Get on," he said gruffly, jerking his head toward the back of his bike. Now. Nia hesitated for a split second, every lesson about stranger danger warring with her desperate need to escape. But there was something in the man's eyes, a flash of pain when he'd seen her signal, that made her trust him. She scrambled onto the back of the motorcycle, her hands awkwardly gripping the sides of the seat. Stone reached back without looking and guided her hands to his waist. "Hold tight," he ordered, just as the sound of squealing tires cut through the humid air. Stone's head snapped toward the safe house's hidden driveway. A black SUV with tinted windows came tearing out onto the highway, kicking up gravel and dust. The driver wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. They were coming after her, fast and reckless. Nia's fingers dug into Stone's leather vest. He could feel her whole body trembling against his back, and something protective and fierce rose up in his chest. Not this time. He wasn't losing another one to these monsters. The Harley's engine roared to life as Stone twisted the throttle. The powerful bike leaped forward, eating up asphalt as the SUV's engine screamed behind them. Nia pressed her face against Stone's back, trying to make herself smaller as the wind whipped around them. In his mirrors, Stone watched the SUV gaining speed, its dark bulk growing larger by the second. The driver was taking curves too fast, the vehicle swaying dangerously as it pursued them. Their desperate speed told Stone everything he needed to know about how valuable their cargo was to them, and how far they'd go to get her back. The motorcycle thundered down Highway 17, carrying its unlikely pair of riders away from the safe house. But Stone knew this was just the beginning. The girl's trembling hands against his ribs reminded him too much of Mariah, of promises broken and a sister lost. This time would be different. This time, he wouldn't fail. The late summer sun beat down on them as they raced forward, the SUV's menacing presence growing in the mirrors, while Stone's mind already worked on where to go, who to call, and how to keep this frightened girl safe, no matter what it took. The Harley thundered down Highway 17, its engine roaring against the humid late summer air. Stone could feel Nia's fingers digging into his leather vest, her whole body trembling against his back as they sped through the winding country roads. The black SUV stayed stubbornly visible in his mirrors, its dark bulk growing larger with each passing minute. Stone's mind raced faster than his motorcycle. Years of riding these back roads had taught him every twist, turn, and hidden path. He needed to think like the hunted, not the hunter. With practiced precision, he downshifted and took a sharp right onto a narrow country lane, the bike leaning so low that Nia gasped. "Hold on tight," he called over his shoulder, voice barely carrying over the wind. "I know these roads better than they do." The SUV's tires screamed as it followed their turn, fishtailing slightly on the loose gravel. Stone allowed himself a grim smile. These weren't local boys. They didn't know what they were in for. "How long were you in there?" Stone asked during a straightaway, his voice carrying just enough for Nia to hear. 3 months, she answered, her voice small and shaky. "Maybe 4. I lost track." Stone's jaw clenched. 3 or 4 months in their hands. His grip tightened on the handlebars as memories of Mariah threatened to surface. He pushed them down, focusing on the road ahead. "They won't stop," Nia added, her words muffled against his back. "They never stop." "They will this time," Stone promised, spotting exactly what he needed up ahead, an old logging road he knew well from his younger days. The SUV was gaining ground, its engine roaring as it closed the gap. Stone could make out 2 figures in the front seats now, one driving, one reaching for something in the glove compartment. They needed to move fast. Stone gunned the engine, letting the SUV creep closer. Let them think they were winning. The logging road was coming up on the left, barely visible unless you knew where to look, marked only by a weathered post that had once held a sign. At the last possible second, Stone cranked the handlebars hard to the left, the Harley's tires finding purchase on the narrow dirt track. The SUV's driver reacted too late, trying to match their turn, but carrying too much speed. The vehicle plowed into the thick brush at the road's edge, its momentum driving it deeper into the tangle of branches and undergrowth. Stone didn't slow down to watch. He kept the bike steady on the rough track until they reached the main road again, only then allowing himself to check the mirrors. No headlights followed. "They'll be stuck there for a while," he said, feeling some of the tension leave Naya's grip. "That brush is thicker than it looks." The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Stone knew they couldn't keep riding all night. The girl was exhausted, probably hungry, and definitely needed medical attention for her scratched-up feet. There was only one place he could think of that might be safe enough. Mabel's diner sat like a beacon of hope, just off Route 43, its neon sign casting a warm glow in the gathering dusk. The small parking lot held only a few cars, perfect for keeping a low profile. Stone pulled the Harley around to the back of the building, cutting the engine in the shadows. "Come on," he said softly, helping Naya off the bike. Her legs wobbled, and he steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "I know the owner. You'll be safe here." The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and Mabel Hartley looked up from behind the counter. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, and her kind face creased with concern as she took in the sight of them, Stone's tense expression and the trembling girl beside him. "Stone Callahan," she said, already moving from behind the counter. "Been a while since you darkened my door." Her eyes settled on Nia, taking in her bare feet and disheveled appearance. Something knowing and sad passed across her features. "Mabel." Stone nodded. "We need a quiet booth and some hot food." "Of course you do," Mabel said, her voice gentling as she approached Nia. "Come on, honey. Let's get you settled in the back where it's peaceful." Nia glanced at Stone, who nodded encouragingly. Mabel led them to a corner booth, partially hidden from the main dining room by a partition. The vinyl seats were worn, but clean, and the table held a small vase with fresh wildflowers. "I'll bring you some water right away," Mabel said, her efficiency born of decades of reading what people needed before they asked. "And I've got fresh soup on the stove." As Mabel bustled away, Nia slid into the booth, drawing her knees up to her chest in a protective gesture that made Stone's heart ache. He'd seen that same posture in other rescued girls, that instinct to make themselves smaller, less visible. Mabel returned quickly with water and warm, damp towels. She set them down gently, then pulled Stone aside, just far enough that Nia couldn't hear. "That child," she whispered, her lined face full of concern. "She's got that look in her eyes, like she hasn't been safe in a long, long time." Stone nodded grimly. "She hasn't been, but she is now." Mabel squeezed his arm. "I'll get that soup, and there's a first aid kit under the counter for those feet of hers. You did right bringing her here, Stone." As Mabel moved away, Stone watched Nia tentatively pick up one of the warm towels, pressing it against her scratched arms. The girl's hands were still shaking, but less now, as if the diner's warmth and Mabel's gentle presence were already beginning to thaw something frozen inside her. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the diner's windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Outside, the world was still full of dangers, but in here, for this moment at least, they had found a pocket of safety. Stone settled into the booth across from Nia, positioning himself where he could watch both the front and back doors. He'd learned long ago that peace was something you had to guard carefully, especially when it came to protecting those who needed it most. Mabel returned with a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup, setting it carefully in front of Nia, along with a plate of fresh buttermilk biscuits. The aroma filled their corner of the diner, homey and comforting. Nia's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the spoon. "Eat as much as you want, honey," Mabel said softly. "There's plenty more where that came from." Stone watched as Nia took her first cautious spoonful, then began eating with increasing urgency, like someone who hadn't seen a proper meal in far too long. He kept his voice gentle, measured. "Take it slow," he advised. "It's not going anywhere." Nia nodded, forcing herself to eat more deliberately. Between spoonfuls, she tore pieces of biscuit and dipped them in the broth. The warm food seemed to steady her, bringing some color back to her pale cheeks. "Can you tell me about where you were?" Stone asked carefully, after she'd eaten about half the bowl. "Anything that might help us stay safe?" Nia's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down slowly, her eyes focused on the table. "It was a house. Looked normal from the outside, white with green shutters. But inside..." She shuddered. "They kept us in the basement mostly. There were 5 of us, maybe 6. Sometimes it was hard to tell." Stone nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the anger building in his chest. "You're very brave for getting out of there." "The signal," Nia said suddenly, looking up at him. "I learned it from a pamphlet. At my last group home, before..." She swallowed hard. "One of the social workers gave them to us. Said to memorize it, that some people would know what it meant. I didn't think..." Her voice trailed off. "My sister used that same signal," Stone said quietly, watching her reaction carefully. "About 3 years ago, on that same stretch of highway." Nia's eyes widened, a flash of recognition and empathy crossing her face. Did you find her?" Stone shook his head. "Not yet, but I'm still looking." Mabel approached their table again, carrying an armload of soft blankets. She draped one around Nia's shoulders, tucking it around her with motherly care. "You're safe here for now, sweetheart," Mabel assured her. "Nobody's going to hurt you on my watch." The girl clutched the blanket tighter, as if trying to believe in the promise of safety it represented. Stone noticed her eyelids growing heavy, the adrenaline from their escape finally wearing off. "I need to make a quick call," he told her, standing slowly so as not to startle her. "Mabel will stay right here with you. I won't be more than 10 minutes." Outside, the night air had grown cooler. Stone walked a few paces from the diner's back door, keeping the building in sight as he pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he knew by heart. "Bear," he said when the gruff voice answered. "I need information. Anything about trafficking activity along Highway 17, White House, green shutters, and I need it fast." His old biker brother's voice grew serious. "This about your sister?" "Maybe. I've got a girl who escaped. Used the signal." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "I'll make some calls. Give me an hour." "Thanks, brother." Stone ended the call, taking a moment to scan the darkness around the diner. Everything seemed quiet, but experience had taught him that quiet wasn't always good. He walked back inside, the bell chiming softly above his head. The warmth and light felt welcoming after the chill outside. But something was wrong. He could feel it immediately in the way Mabel was standing rigid behind the counter, in the way Nia's face had drained of all its recently gained color. On the counter, a phone screen glowed with an incoming message. Stone's stomach clenched as he approached. The message showed a photo, clearly taken within the last hour. Him and Nia walking into the diner together. Below it, words that made his blood run cold. "We want the girl. Stop interfering." Stone's hand shot out, snatching the phone from the counter. "Back room, now," Mabel was already moving, guiding Nia with gentle urgency toward the kitchen. Stone followed close behind, scanning the parking lot through the windows as they hurried past. The diner's back room was small but secure, lined with metal shelves stocked with dry goods and cleaning supplies. A single bulb cast yellow light across their faces as Stone shut and locked the door behind them. Nia huddled in the corner, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. "They found us already," she whispered. "How did they find us so fast?" Stone leaned against a shelf, his mind racing. The message wasn't just a threat, it was personal. They knew who he was. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough. "This isn't random. These people, they've been watching me for years." Mabel settled onto an overturned milk crate, her normally cheerful face drawn with concern. "What do you mean, Stone?" He ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of old memories. 3 years ago, before my sister disappeared, I started noticing things. Girls going missing along certain routes, suspicious houses. I tried to gather evidence, get law enforcement involved. His fist clenched. But these people have connections. They turned it around on me, made me look like the suspicious one. Then Mariah vanished, and I knew it was retaliation. "Mariah," Nia breathed, her eyes growing wide. She straightened suddenly, clutching the blanket tighter. I heard that name, in the house." Stone went completely still. "What?" "The men who watched us, they would sometimes talk when they thought we were sleeping." Nia's voice shook slightly. "One night, they were angry, drinking. They talked about someone named Mariah who got away once, said she embarrassed them, made them look weak to the boss." Stone's knees weakened, and he had to grip the shelf to stay upright. All this time searching, and here was the first real confirmation that his sister was connected to the same ring that had taken Nia, that she had fought back, escaped like Nia had. "Did they say anything else?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "About where she went?" Nia shook her head. "Just that they weren't supposed to let it happen again. That's why they—" She swallowed hard. "That's why they started being harder on us. More locks, more guards." Mabel reached out and took Nia's hand, squeezing it gently. The girl held on like it was a lifeline. Stone checked his watch. 3:15 in the morning. The darkness outside the small window was absolute, but it wouldn't last. His mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. "We can't stay here," he said finally. "They know this place now. If we leave you here, Mabel—" "Don't you worry about me," Mabel cut in firmly. "I've got friends in the sheriff's department, but you two need to go before dawn." She stood up, determination replacing the worry on her face. "Give me 10 minutes to pack you some food." While Mabel bustled around the kitchen, Stone and Nia remained in the back room. He could see her fighting exhaustion, trying to stay alert despite the late hour and emotional strain. "Where will we go?" she asked quietly. "I know a place," Stone answered. "Old meeting grounds where my brothers and I used to gather. It's defensible, off the grid. We can figure out our next move there." Nia nodded, trust beginning to show through her fear. It humbled him. That trust made him even more determined to protect her. Mabel returned with a paper bag full of sandwiches and bottles of water. But before handing it over, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something that gleamed in the dim light, a silver cross on a delicate chain. "This was my mother's," she said, moving to stand in front of Nia. "She always said it helped her feel brave when she was scared." With gentle hands, she fastened it around Nia's neck. Tears welled in Nia's eyes as she touched the cross. "I can't take this." "You can and you will," Mabel said firmly, pulling her into a tight hug. "You stay strong, honey. You're not alone anymore." The embrace seemed to give Naya strength. When she pulled back, she stood straighter, more resolved. Stone checked outside one final time, making sure the parking lot was clear. The pre-dawn air was cool and still as they slipped out the back door. His bike waited in the shadows where he'd moved it earlier. "Hold on tight," he told Nia as she climbed on behind him. "It's about an hour's ride." As he started the engine, the first hints of dawn were beginning to lighten the eastern sky. Naya's arms tightened around his waist, and Stone felt the weight of their shared situation settle over him. They were both being hunted now, him for trying to expose the truth years ago, her for daring to escape. But maybe together, they had a chance of finding Mariah and bringing down the people who had hurt them all. The sun was rising in earnest as they took the back roads toward the old meeting grounds, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Stone felt Naya's grip remain steady, no longer shaking with fear. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The old warehouse loomed against the morning sky, its weathered brick walls telling stories of decades gone by. Stone guided his Harley through the rusted gates, the gravel crunching beneath their wheels. Nia's arms were still wrapped tightly around his waist, though her grip had relaxed somewhat during their hour-long ride. As they pulled up to the building, several motorcycles were already parked in a loose semicircle. Stone recognized them immediately. His brothers hadn't forgotten their old morning routine of gathering here for coffee and conversation. "It's okay," he said softly over his shoulder to Nia. "These men, they're family. They'll help us." The warehouse door creaked open, and 4 men stepped out into the morning light. They were older now, their leather vests showing wear, their faces lined with years of sun and wind, but their eyes were sharp and alert as they took in the scene before them. "Well, well," called out Buck, the eldest of the group at 52 years old. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide his concerned frown. "When you didn't show for morning coffee, we figured something was up." Stone helped Nia off the bike, noting how she stayed close to his side, her eyes darting between the men. "Brothers," he said, "we need your help." The group moved inside the warehouse, where mismatched furniture created a makeshift living room. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Tank, a broad-shouldered man with gentle eyes, immediately went to the coffee maker in the corner. "Here, sweetheart," he said, pouring a cup and offering it to Nia. "You look like you could use this." Nia accepted the cup with trembling hands, murmuring a quiet "thank you." She perched on the edge of an old armchair while Stone remained standing, his protective stance obvious to everyone. "This is Nia," Stone began, his voice tight with emotion. "Yesterday she escaped from traffickers on Highway 17, used the same hand signal Mariah did." The room went absolutely still. Everyone knew about Mariah, about how her disappearance had nearly destroyed Stone. "But there's more," Stone continued. He explained everything, the chase, the safe house, the threatening message at Mabel's diner. With each detail, the men's expressions grew darker, their postures more rigid. "They knew who I was," Stone finished. "This isn't random. They remembered me from when I tried to expose their operation years ago." Nia had been quiet throughout Stone's explanation, but now she spoke up, her voice soft but steady. "They kept us in different houses, never the same place for too long. But I remember things, patterns, faces, conversations." The men listened intently as Nia slowly shared her story. She described the guards' routines, the vehicles they used, the ways they communicated. When she mentioned overhearing them talk about Mariah, several of the bikers exchanged meaningful looks. Doc, a former medic with weathered hands and kind eyes, leaned forward. "About 6 months ago, I heard something interesting at the hospital. A girl came in, scared but determined. Said a woman named Mariah had helped her escape, given her money for a bus ticket." Stone's head snapped up. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I couldn't confirm it was your Mariah," Doc replied gently. "Didn't want to give you false hope. But now—" "She's alive," Stone whispered. "She's fighting back." As the morning wore on, more information emerged. Whisper, their intelligence gatherer, had been tracking unusual patterns in traffic along certain routes. Tank had noticed increased activity at specific truck stops. Piece by piece, a larger picture began to form. Around noon, Tank's wife Sarah arrived with food, homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and cookies still warm from the oven. Naya's eyes widened at the spread, and Sarah immediately took the girl under her wing, making sure she ate plenty. The afternoon brought a subtle change in Naya. As she realized these rough-looking men truly meant her no harm, her shoulders relaxed slightly. When Whisper's granddaughter dropped by with some spare clothes, Nia's smile was genuine, if brief. "Could I have some paper?" she asked suddenly. "And a pen? I want to draw something." Buck provided a notepad, and everyone watched as Naya's hand moved across the paper with surprising confidence. A map took shape. The compound where she'd been held, complete with guard positions and escape routes. "This is incredible," Stone said, studying the detailed drawing. "You remembered all this?" Nia nodded. "I had to. Knowing the layout, the schedules, it was the only way to stay sane, to believe I might get out someday." As evening approached, the group moved outside. Tank built a small fire in the old drum they kept for such purposes, its flames pushing back the growing darkness. Someone found a spare leather jacket for Naya, who had started shivering in the cooling air. The conversation continued, plans being made, information being shared. But Stone's mind was elsewhere. He stared into the flames, seeing Mariah's face, hearing Nia's stories of captivity. The guilt he'd carried for years burned in his chest. Guilt for not finding Mariah sooner, for not being there when she needed him. Naya sat nearby, her borrowed jacket too big, but somehow making her look stronger, more protected. The firelight caught the silver cross Mabel had given her, making it gleam. She was watching the flames, too, but her expression wasn't lost or afraid anymore. There was determination there, and something else. Hope. Stone's hands clenched at his sides. He had failed Mariah once, had been unable to protect her. Looking at Naya now, seeing her courage, her resilience, he made a silent vow. He wouldn't fail again. Not Naya and not Mariah. Whatever it took, he would make this right. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Around them, his brothers continued their quiet discussions, their presence a solid reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. They had always been there for each other, through every storm life had thrown their way. Now they would stand together again, protecting this brave young girl and searching for the sister who had never stopped fighting. The morning sun crept over the horizon, painting the warehouse walls in shades of amber. Dew sparkled on the grass where Stone, Naya, and several of the bikers had camped overnight. They'd made do with sleeping bags and blankets, the warehouse too dusty for comfortable rest inside. Stone sat on an overturned crate, nursing a cup of coffee that Tank's wife had brought over at dawn. The rest of the camp was just stirring when his phone buzzed. The number wasn't one he recognized, but something made him answer. "Stone, it's Hawk." The voice was quiet, controlled. "Got your message from Doc. Needed time to be sure it was safe to call back." Stone straightened, his heart quickening. Hawk Ramirez was someone he hadn't heard from in years, a survivor who'd escaped trafficking as a teenager and now ran a garage 2 towns over. If Hawk was calling, it had to be important. "What have you got?" Stone kept his voice low, though Naya stirred nearby, her keen survival instincts picking up on his tension. There was a pause on the line, the kind that comes before life-changing news. "I think I saw her, Stone. Your sister. Mariah." The coffee cup slipped from Stone's fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Naya was fully awake now, watching him with concerned eyes. "When?" Stone managed to ask, his throat tight. 3 months ago. She came into the shop needing a tire change." Hawk's voice carried the careful precision of someone who understood the weight of every word. Thin woman, early 30s, jumpy, kept checking the exits. But what caught my attention were the burn scars on her forearms. Looked like rope burns, the kind you get fighting restraints. Stone's free hand gripped the crate so hard his knuckles went white. The description matched what he'd imagined during sleepless nights. Mariah fighting, surviving, carrying the marks of her captivity. "You're sure?" he whispered. "As sure as I can be. She didn't give her name, but when I mentioned I knew you, there was recognition in her eyes. She tried to hide it, but I saw." Emotions crashed through Stone like waves: hope, fear, guilt, determination. His vision blurred, and he felt a gentle touch on his arm. Nia had moved closer, her face full of understanding. "If she's alive," Nia said softly, "we'll find her. We have to." Stone nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he could, he turned back to the phone. "Hawk, we need to talk in person. Can we come to you?" "Yeah, but be careful. Take back roads. Bring only people you trust completely." Within 30 minutes, they were ready to move. Stone chose Tank and Buck to ride with them, both experienced riders who knew how to spot trouble. Naya rode behind Stone as always, her grip sure and steady now after days on the road. The morning air was crisp as they wound through country back roads, avoiding main highways. Stone's mind raced with possibilities. 3 months. Mariah had been so close just 3 months ago. What had happened since then? Where was she now? Hawk's garage sat at the edge of town, a weathered building with peeling paint and solid security. Cameras tracked their approach, and the side door opened before they could knock. Hawk stood in the doorway, a man in his 40s with watchful eyes and grease-stained hands. "Inside," he said simply, ushering them through. The garage's office was small but clean, with a coffee maker in the corner and maps covering one wall. Hawk closed the blinds before speaking. "There's more," he said, looking at Stone. "She left me a message. Didn't say it directly, couldn't risk it, but she wanted you to know something was happening inside the organization." "What kind of something?" Tank asked. Hawk's eyes flickered to Naya. "Someone's been helping girls escape, working from the inside, creating opportunities, leaving supplies, marking safe routes." Nia's breath caught. "The blanket," she whispered. "In the storage room where I was kept, there was a blanket hidden behind some boxes, and a bottle of water, and—" "And what?" Stone prompted gently. "A piece of paper with 3 marks drawn on it, like the signal I used on the highway." Naya's eyes were wide with realization. "It was her, wasn't it? Mariah was helping us." Hawk nodded slowly. "She told me to watch for girls coming through, said someone was trying to get them out. Wouldn't say more, couldn't risk it. But she had a purpose, Stone. Whatever she's been through, she's fighting back." Stone pressed his palms against his eyes, overwhelmed by pride and fear for his sister. All these years, he'd imagined her helpless, trapped. Instead, she'd been waging her own war, saving others even while in danger herself. "The compound," Nia said suddenly. "The one I drew on the map, I heard guards talking about moving everyone soon, something about inspection, schedules changing. When? Stone demanded. Within the week. They were angry about it, said it was too soon. Hawk moved to his wall of maps, pointing to a section of rural highway. There's been increased traffic here, mostly at night. Trucks that don't fit the usual patterns. Could be they're setting up a new location. Stone felt the familiar weight of his leather jacket, the keys to his Harley heavy in his pocket. For 10 years, he'd searched for any sign of Mariah. Now he had more than a sign. He had proof she was alive, proof she was fighting. His sister hadn't given up, and neither would he. Standing, he looked at each person in the room, his trusted brothers, brave Nia, watchful Hawk. They all nodded, understanding without words. It was time to move. As they walked back to their bikes, Nia touched Stone's arm again. "She's like you," she said quietly. "Helping others, even when it's dangerous. That's how I know we'll find her." Stone swung onto his Harley, gripping the handlebars as the engine roared to life. Hope burned in his chest, stronger than it had been in a decade. Mariah was out there, and she was still fighting. Now, finally, he could fight alongside her. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel parking lot of the Pine Grove Motel, a weathered single-story building on the outskirts of town. Stone pulled his Harley into a spot far from the road, with Tank and Buck flanking him on either side. Nia slid off the bike, her legs stiff from hours of riding. "We'll take rooms 7 and 8, Stone told the others, jingling the keys the sleepy clerk had given him. "Connected doors, better for keeping watch." Inside, the rooms were clean but basic. Faded floral wallpaper, worn carpet, and simple furnishings that had seen better days. But the beds were made with fresh linens, and the bathroom had hot water. Luxuries Nia hadn't known for months. "Get some rest," Stone told her gently. "We move at midnight." But Nia shook her head. "We need to plan first. I remember things, important things, about the compound." Stone studied her face, noting the determination in her eyes. He nodded and gathered everyone around the small table by the window. Nia found a notepad in the drawer and began sketching. "The main building looks like an old hunting lodge," she explained, her pencil moving swiftly. 2 stories, lots of small rooms. They keep most of the girls upstairs, but there are hidden spaces in the basement, too. I found them while cleaning." Her hand trembled slightly as she drew, but her voice remained steady. "The guards rotate every 4 hours. They're sloppiest during the 3 a.m. shift. That's when I got out. And here," she pointed to a section of her drawing, "there's a service door that's usually unlocked because the cook uses it for smoke breaks." Tank leaned forward, his weathered face intent. "Security cameras?" 4 on the outside, but one doesn't work. The one covering the north corner. They keep saying they'll fix it, but never do." Nia's attention to detail impressed Stone. She hadn't just survived. She'd observed, planned, prepared. "What about communications?" Buck asked. "How do they coordinate?" Nia's expression grew focused. "They use phones, but there's a pattern. Every 2 hours they send an all-clear message. If they miss one, others come to check. And they use code words, package for girls they're moving, delivery for new arrivals." Stone reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn road map. "Now it's our turn to teach you something. On the road, survival means spotting trouble before it spots you." For the next hour, he showed Nia how to read the subtle signs of danger, unusual traffic patterns, vehicles that linger too long, the way light reflects differently off unmarked police cars. She absorbed everything with quiet intensity. "Watch the mirrors," Stone explained. "Not just behind us, but what's reflected in other vehicles' windows. Sometimes you'll catch movement that way." "Like how I used to watch for guards in the window reflections," Nia said softly. Stone's heart clenched at the reminder of what she'd endured. As the sun began to set, they ate sandwiches from a local diner and reviewed their plan again. Tank and Buck would cover the perimeter, while Stone and Naya approached the service entrance. They had burner phones to coordinate, and a meeting point 2 miles away if things went wrong. "Remember," Stone told Naya, "if anything feels off, anything at all, we pull back. No risks." Naya touched the cross necklace Mabel had given her. "Mariah took risks to help us. Now we help her." They waited until full dark before leaving the motel. The moon was just a slim crescent, perfect for staying hidden. Their bikes moved like shadows along the back roads, headlights off once they got close to the compound. Stone felt Nia's grip tighten as they approached the turnoff she'd described. The dirt road was barely visible, threading between dense trees. After half a mile, he cut the engine, and the others did the same. In the sudden silence, distant voices carried through the trees. Stone's heart pounded as he helped Naya off the bike. 10 years of searching, hoping, grieving, and now, finally, he might find his sister. He thought of Mariah's courage, secretly helping girls escape while staying behind herself. His throat tightened with emotion. Naya squeezed his arm, understanding in her eyes. Stone took a deep breath and whispered words he'd dreamed of saying for a decade. "If Mariah's in there, we bring her home tonight." The night pressed around them like a heavy blanket as Stone and Naya crept toward the broken fence panel. Moonlight filtered through the trees in weak silver ribbons, barely illuminating their path. Stone's heart thundered in his chest as they approached the spot Naya had described, a section where rust had eaten through the metal, creating a gap just wide enough for someone to slip through. "There," Naya whispered, pointing to the fence. Her finger trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "The panel moves if you push it right." Stone tested the metal carefully, feeling it give under his touch. He glanced back at Tank and Buck, who had taken up positions in the tree line, their dark shapes barely visible in the shadows. They would maintain the perimeter, ready to create a diversion if needed. The fence creaked softly as Stone widened the gap. He went through first, then helped Naya follow. The compound loomed before them, a large hunting lodge transformed into something sinister. Light spilled from a few upper windows, but the basement level was dark. Just as Naya had said, a security camera hung broken and useless above the north corner. They pressed against the building's wooden siding, moving like ghosts through the deepest shadows. Stone's years of running with the motorcycle club had taught him how to move silently, and Naya's months of captivity had made her an expert at staying unseen. Together, they made their way to the service entrance. The door's lock clicked open easily under Stone's practiced touch. Inside, the basement air hung thick with moisture and mildew. Their footsteps whispered against the concrete floor as Nia led the way through the darkness, navigating by memory. "This way," she breathed, barely audible. "There's a room they use for storage. I heard crying from there once when I was cleaning." They passed several closed doors before Nia stopped, touching Stone's arm. Through a narrow window, dim light revealed a figure huddled in the corner of a small room. Stone's breath caught in his throat. Even in the poor light, he would know that silhouette anywhere. The door wasn't locked. They weren't worried about anyone escaping from inside. Stone eased it open, his hands shaking. The woman's head snapped up, fear flashing across her face before recognition dawned. "Stone?" Mariah's voice was a broken whisper, thick with disbelief. "Stone?" He crossed the room in 2 steps, falling to his knees beside her. "Mariah, oh God, Mariah!" His voice cracked as he gathered her into his arms. She felt so thin, so fragile, but her grip was fierce as she clung to him. "You found me. she sobbed into his shoulder. "You really found me?" From her position by the door, Nia watched the reunion with tears streaming down her face. She saw in Mariah's desperate embrace everything she wished she could share with her own lost family. The siblings held each other, 10 years of separation dissolving in a flood of whispered words and muffled sobs. Stone ran his hands over Mariah's face, cataloging the changes. New lines around her eyes, a scar along her jaw, the hollow shadows in her cheeks. "I never stopped looking," he choked out. "Never." "I knew you wouldn't," Mariah whispered back. "I knew you'd come." The piercing wail of an alarm shattered their moment of joy. "No," Nia gasped. "No, no, no." Heavy footsteps thundered above them. Shouts echoed through the building as armed men descended the stairs. Stone yanked Mariah to her feet, pushing her behind him as he drew his gun. "Run!" he yelled to Nia. "Get to the bikes!" But before they could move, the basement erupted in chaos. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as traffickers poured in from both directions. The air crackled with gunfire. Stone fired back, trying to clear a path to the exit. "This way!" he shouted, gripping Mariah's hand tightly as they ran. Nia darted ahead of them, leading the way back toward the service door. A bullet pinged off the wall near Stone's head. Another. Then came the sound he would hear in his nightmares, Nia's sharp cry of pain as she stumbled and fell. "No!" Stone lunged forward, but rough hands seized Mariah from behind. Her scream pierced his heart as she was torn from his grip. "Stone, help me!" Mariah's voice rose in terror as they dragged her away. He spun, trying to reach her, but Nia lay crumpled on the floor, blood spreading across her side. The choice before him was impossible, his sister or the wounded girl who had trusted him to keep her safe. "I'll come back," he shouted to Mariah, his voice raw with anguish. "I swear I'll come back." Mariah's screams echoed through the basement as Stone scooped Nia into his arms. Her blood was hot against his skin, her breathing shallow and rapid. Bullets sparked off the walls around them as he ran, cradling her close to his chest. He burst through the service door into the night air, tears streaming down his face as Mariah's voice grew fainter behind him. Each step that carried him further from his sister felt like a knife in his heart, but Nia's life literally bled out in his arms. Stone ran through the woods, branches whipping his face as gunfire continued to explode around him. Nia's head lolled against his shoulder, her skin growing colder by the second. Behind him, Mariah's screams faded into the darkness, leaving only the sound of his own ragged sobs as he fled into the night. The mountain clinic emerged from the darkness like a beacon of hope, its windows glowing softly against the pre-dawn sky. Stone's boots thundered up the wooden steps, his precious burden cradled against his chest. Nia's blood had soaked through his shirt, her skin pale as moonlight. "Help!" His voice cracked as he burst through the doors. "Please, somebody help!" A night nurse looked up from her desk, her eyes widening at the sight of them. She jumped to her feet, already calling for the doctor. "What happened?" "Gunshot wound," Stone choked out. "She's just a kid. Please." The next moments blurred into a whirlwind of activity. Medical staff swarmed around them, gently taking Nia from his arms and rushing her down the hallway on a gurney. Stone tried to follow, but a firm hand on his chest stopped him. "Sir, you need to let us work," the nurse said kindly but firmly. "The waiting room is through there. I'll come update you as soon as I—" "We know anything!" Stone stumbled into the empty waiting room, his hands shaking as he stared at the blood staining his clothes. Nia's blood. His sister's screams still echoed in his ears, the memory of her being torn away replaying in endless, torturous loops. He collapsed into a chair, his huge frame folding in on itself as the weight of his failure crashed over him. Mariah had been right there in his arms, and he'd lost her again. And now Nia, who had trusted him to keep her safe, lay fighting for her life because of his mistakes. For the first time since he was a small boy, Stone felt the overwhelming urge to pray. He slid from the chair to his knees, pressing his forehead against his clasped hands. "God," he whispered, his voice rough with tears, "I know I haven't talked to you in a long time, but please, please don't let her die. I'm so sorry, Mariah. I'm so sorry, Nia. I failed you both." Hours crawled by like years. Stone paced the waiting room, alternating between desperate prayers and crushing guilt. The sky outside gradually lightened from black to deep blue to the soft pink of dawn. Finally, the doctor appeared, still wearing surgical scrubs. "She's stable," he said, and Stone's knees nearly buckled with relief. "The bullet grazed her side. Painful, and she lost blood, but no major organs were hit. She's very lucky." "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. "She's still groggy from the anesthesia, but she's asking for you." Stone followed him down the quiet hallway to a small recovery room. Nia lay propped up on pillows, looking impossibly small and young in the hospital bed. An IV dripped steadily beside her, and white bandages wrapped her torso. Her eyes fluttered open as he approached. "Stone," she whispered. "I'm here, kid." He hesitated by the bed until she patted the space beside her. "Sit," she insisted, her voice weak but determined. "Please." He perched carefully on the edge of the mattress, mindful not to jostle her. "Nia, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better." She shook her head, wincing slightly at the movement. "No. You did everything you could, and—" Her voice caught. "We found her, Stone. We found Mariah." Fresh pain lanced through his heart at his sister's name. "But I lost her again. I had to choose." "You chose right," Nia said firmly. "Mariah would want you to save me first. I know because she saved me too." Stone looked at her questioningly. "When I was there, in that place," Nia continued softly, "Mariah would slip notes to the girls being held. Little messages of hope, reminders to stay strong. She taught us the hand signal, the one I used to flag you down. She risked everything to help us." Tears spilled down Stone's cheeks as he imagined his sister, despite her own captivity, still fighting to protect others. "That's why you have to go back for her," Nia said, "even if it means leaving me here for a while. She gave me the courage to escape. Now it's time for you to bring her home." A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. The nurse who had first greeted them stood there, her face full of compassion. "I couldn't help overhearing some of your story," she said. "This clinic is pretty remote, and we have good security. We can keep Nia safe while she recovers." "We'll all watch out for her," the doctor added, stepping into the room. "You have my word." Stone looked at the medical staff, then back at Nia. She reached for his hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "Go," she said simply. "She saved me. Now you save her." Stone stood slowly, his heart torn between staying to protect Nia and racing back to rescue Mariah. But looking into Nia's determined eyes, he saw the same fierce spirit he'd always admired in his sister. He bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to Nia's forehead. "I'll be back for you," he promised. "Both of you." "I know you will," Nia whispered. With one last look at the brave girl who had helped him find his sister, Stone walked out of the room. His grief had transformed into steel-hard determination. He would bring Mariah home, or die trying. The morning sun cast long shadows as Stone's motorcycle thundered down Main Street. His heart pounded with renewed purpose as he pulled into the parking lot of the sheriff's office. For too many years, he'd let his biker pride keep him from working with law enforcement. But not today. Not with Mariah's life on the line. The station was a modest brick building with weather-worn American flags hanging out front. Inside, the walls were lined with wanted posters and community notices. The desk sergeant looked up warily as Stone approached, his leather vest and rough appearance drawing immediate attention. "I need to see Sheriff Daniels," Stone said firmly. "It's about human trafficking in your jurisdiction." Minutes later, Stone sat across from Sheriff Dan Daniels, a weathered man in his late 50s with sharp eyes and silver hair. The sheriff listened intently as Stone laid out everything: Naya's escape, finding Mariah, the firefight at the compound, and the trafficking ring's operations. "I should have come to you sooner," Stone admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But I've spent too long thinking I could handle this alone." Sheriff Daniels leaned forward, studying Stone's face. "Sometimes it takes more courage to ask for help than to go it alone," he said quietly. "I lost my niece to traffickers 5 years ago. Never found her." He picked up his phone. "This stops now." Within an hour, the sheriff's office was buzzing with activity. State authorities were contacted, and investigators began arriving. Stone provided detailed descriptions of the compound and the traffickers, while back at the clinic, Naya worked with a sketch artist to document the facility's layout. Word spread quickly through the small town. At the local diner, hunters offered their knowledge of the surrounding woods. A group of retired veterans volunteered their tactical experience. Even the high school shop teacher, who'd served as a combat engineer, came forward with detailed topographical maps of the area. By mid-afternoon, Stone's biker brothers rumbled into town, trucks loaded with supplies, radios, first aid kits, night vision equipment. They gathered in the sheriff's conference room, their usual gruff manner softened by the seriousness of the mission. "We've got your back, brother," one of the older bikers said, clapping Stone on the shoulder. "All the way." Sheriff Daniels orchestrated the operation with practiced efficiency. The plan took shape: coordinated raids from multiple angles, with decoy operations to divide the traffickers' attention. A specialized rescue team would focus on extracting Mariah and any other captives, while state police secured the perimeter. As evening approached, Stone drove back to check on Nia. She was sitting up in bed, surrounded by papers covered in drawings and notes about the compound. "The nurses say I'm doing better," she told him with a small smile. "Did you get the help we need?" Stone nodded. "The whole town's coming together. We're going in tomorrow night." "Good," Nia said firmly. "Bring her home." Later that night, Stone stood in the clinic's parking lot, gazing up at the stars scattered across the velvet black sky. The same stars would be shining over Mariah, wherever she was being held. His hands gripped the railing as emotion welled up in his chest. "Hold on, Mariah," he whispered to the night sky. "Just one more night." The sky turned from black to purple as first light crept over the horizon. Dew sparkled on grass beside the dirt road where dozens of vehicles waited in formation. Sheriff Daniels stood before the assembled group, his voice steady and firm as he gave final instructions. "Remember, there are innocent lives at stake," he said, scanning the determined faces before him. "We move fast. We move smart." Stone adjusted his protective vest, triple-checking the radio clipped to his shoulder. Nia's hand-drawn map was folded in his pocket, its details burned into his memory after hours of study. Around him, state police checked weapons, while his biker brothers mounted their motorcycles, the low rumble of engines breaking the dawn silence. The convoy moved out in careful synchronization. Sheriff's trucks led the way, followed by unmarked state vehicles and the bikers. They split into pre-assigned groups at designated points, encircling the compound like a tightening noose. Stone's team took the eastern approach, using the knowledge from Mariah's old escape routes to find the weakest entry points. "Teams in position," crackled the radio. "Execute on my mark." Stone's heart hammered against his ribs as Sheriff Daniels' voice counted down. "At go," the world erupted into coordinated chaos. Flashbangs burst through windows, doors crashed inward. Stone led his team through a side entrance, their footsteps thundering down dim hallways. The first traffickers they encountered threw their hands up immediately, the overwhelming show of force sapping their will to fight. Others weren't so wise. Gunshots echoed from deeper in the building, followed by shouts and the sound of breaking glass as some tried to flee through windows. "Stop right there!" Stone heard Sheriff Daniels bellow from somewhere outside, followed by the sound of running feet and a brief scuffle. Stone pressed forward, checking room after room. His throat tightened at the sight of bare mattresses on floors, chains bolted to walls. Then, from below, a muffled cry reached his ears. "Down here!" he shouted to his team, finding stairs that led to a basement level. The air grew thick and damp as they descended. A locked door at the bottom gave way with one powerful kick. Stone's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene that made his breath catch. There stood Mariah, arms spread wide to shield two terrified young girls behind her. Her face was bruised, her lips split, but her eyes blazed with protective fury until she recognized her brother. "Stone?" she whispered, voice breaking. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, gathering her into his arms as she collapsed against him. Mariah's whole body shook with sobs of relief as she clutched at his vest. "I've got you," Stone murmured, his own tears falling into her hair. "I've got you, sister." The 2 young girls huddled together, watching with wide eyes until female officers arrived to escort them safely outside. More rescued victims emerged from other parts of the compound as the operation concluded, each one immediately surrounded by medical staff and crisis counselors. Stone kept his arm around Mariah as they walked through the building's main entrance into the bright morning sunlight. Red and blue lights flashed across the scene as handcuffed traffickers were loaded into patrol cars. Sheriff Daniels directed operations from the center of the yard, nodding in satisfaction as the last rooms were cleared and secured. An ambulance waited nearby, its back doors open. As they approached it, Mariah's steps slowed. She turned to look up at her brother, her eyes filled with a decade's worth of pain and hope. "I knew you'd come someday," she whispered. Stone hugged her tighter as paramedics approached with a blanket. Behind them, the compound that had held so much darkness stood silent and empty, its power finally broken in the light of a new day. Autumn painted the mountains in brilliant shades of red and gold as gentle breezes stirred fallen leaves across the sidewalks. 1 week had passed since the raid, and healing had begun to take root like spring flowers pushing through winter soil. In the cozy foster home, arranged by Sheriff Daniels, Nia sat cross-legged on a window seat, working through her algebra homework. The afternoon sun warmed her face as she concentrated, pencil moving steadily across the page. Her side still ached sometimes where the bullet had grazed her, but the wound was healing well under careful attention. Margaret Callahan, Stone's mother, bustled into the room carrying a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies. Her silver hair caught the sunlight as she set the treats beside Nia with a gentle smile. "How's the math coming along, sweetheart?" Margaret asked, smoothing Nia's dark curls with a maternal touch. "Getting better," Nia replied, reaching for a cookie. "Mrs. Peterson says I'm catching up fast." Margaret had visited every single day since Nia moved into the foster home, bringing home-cooked meals, school supplies, and most importantly, her steadfast presence. The older woman's quiet strength reminded Nia of Mariah, and that thought brought a smile to her face. Across town at the Survivor Support Center, Mariah sat in a circle with other young women sharing her story. Her bruises had faded to yellow, but her spirit grew stronger each day. She spoke softly but firmly about her experiences, using them to show others that hope could survive even the darkest circumstances. "We're not defined by what happened to us," she told the group, her hand steady as she held her coffee cup. "We're defined by how we choose to rise." The other women nodded, some wiping away tears, others reaching out to squeeze her hand. Mariah had found her calling in these rooms, turning her pain into purpose. Each girl she helped felt like a small victory against the darkness she'd escaped. Stone, meanwhile, had thrown himself into his new role as a community liaison for at-risk youth. His office at the local community center was small but welcoming, its walls already covered with resource posters and helpline numbers. The same determination that once fueled his search for Mariah now drove him to prevent other young people from falling into dangerous situations. Sheriff Daniels had helped clear Stone's name of old accusations, recognizing that his past actions had been driven by desperate attempts to find his sister. The aging lawman often stopped by the community center, bringing coffee and discussing ways to better protect vulnerable kids in their area. As 3 o'clock approached that afternoon, Stone pulled up outside the high school on his Harley, now cleaned and polished to respectability. He watched students stream out of the building, chatting and laughing, until he spotted Naya among them. She walked with new confidence, her backpack slung over one shoulder, wearing a sweater Margaret had helped her pick out for the cooling weather. When she reached the sidewalk, she paused and looked directly at Stone. A mischievous grin spread across her face as she raised her hand, executing the same 3-part signal she'd used on that desperate day on Highway 17. This time, though, her eyes danced with playfulness instead of fear. Stone clutched his chest dramatically, pretending to stagger against his motorcycle. "Oh no, better not scare me like that, kid," he called out, drawing laughs from nearby students. Nia jogged over, her smile brightening the whole afternoon. "Just checking if you'd still come," she teased, adjusting her backpack strap. Stone placed his hand over his heart, his voice growing serious despite his smile. "Kid, I'll always come. That's a promise." Just then, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Mariah stepped out, having finished her support group session early to join them. She looked healthier now, her eyes clear and bright as she walked toward them. The 3 of them stood together in the autumn sunlight. Stone, the protector who'd never stopped searching. Mariah, the survivor who'd turned her freedom into a mission to help others. And Naya, the brave girl whose signal had set everything in motion. They had become something precious and unexpected, a family forged by courage and hope. Naya looked between the siblings who had changed her life, feeling the warmth of belonging wrap around her like a favorite blanket. The hand signal that had once meant desperate escape now represented something different, a reminder that help would always come, that safety could be found, that love could grow in the most unlikely places. As they turned to leave, Naya climbing onto Stone's motorcycle while Mariah followed in her car, the afternoon light caught the small cross necklace Mabel had given Nia that first night. It glinted like a star, a tiny beacon of hope. Just as that necklace had been passed to her with love, their story would become a light for others, proving that even the darkest roads could lead to new beginnings. The school parking lot emptied around them as they prepared to head home, their laughter mixing with the rustle of falling leaves. They were more than survivors now. They were guides, protectors, and most importantly, family. The 2 lives saved on that summer highway had indeed become the first of many, as hope spread like ripples in a pond, touching life after life with the promise of better days ahead. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.